And there you get my hands. Okay. Make it very informal in that film. I am ready.
Okay. So I'm doing my presentation on the Quality School, Managing Students Without Coercion by Dr. William Glasser. This is what the book looks like. So who is Dr. William Glasser? His birthplace is actually Ohio, where he later went to Case Western Reserve University, where he earned a BA in chemical engineering and an MA in psychology. He later went to UCLA. He's the developer of reality therapy and choice theory. He is an internationally recognized psychiatrist, but he's considered controversial because he goes against the grain as far as most psychiatrists choose to heavily medicate their patients for mental illness, and he pondered and hypothesized that possibly people who appeared to have mental problems or a mental illness, that maybe that was just from a lack of unhappiness, and they didn't need to be medicated. So he's very innovative in that. He studied motivation and behavior within choice theory, and has published several books, received a Lifetime Achievement Award, and his death was in 2013, so he recently passed away. His buzzword or main topic is choice theory, which he also wrote a book on. Here's a quote: "All of our behavior is an attempt to satisfy basic needs like love and power." When I apply this to education, this is basically what I got out of it. It's the combining the need of a worker or student with what the manager or teacher needs accomplished. So you're taking one of those basic needs like socialization, or the need for love, or the need to feel important, which I guess all of those kind of fall into one another, but that's the main basic need that he focused on in the text. He also applied Edward Deming's model that he used in manufacturing. Deming actually went to Japan after post-World War II and helped rebuild their economy, and this is one of the models that he used. So in this approach, the worker works within the system. Glasser would say that that's the student. Then you have managers, and you have different divisions of manager. You have manager 1, 2, and 3, and they work on the system. They're not working within it. They're not actually making the product. If you're making a couch, they're not going to be the one putting the staples in. They're responsible for the consistency and purpose of the organization, finding the highest quality at the lowest cost. They're looking out for the company, but they're also responsible for the future of the workers. So in this system, your managers, you have the teacher, who's kind of like that supervisor of a particular area. If you're like in a store or something, that might be the supervisor of, I don't know, clothing, who puts out, the right signs or the advertising for that. And then administration would be like your second boss or your general manager, who is overlooking that whole store. And then higher administration might be like the superintendent, would be someone such as like a district supervisor, who's really focusing on more so the quality and the lowest cost in the whole organization. So some of my numbers. One of the things that he looks at is the quality of education of students. And I'll get to that in just a moment. I'll tie that in. I've looked at the enrollment of public schools, public high schools specifically, and you've got these numbers here. And then over here are the dropout rates for each one of those areas. You can see that you've got about 1.8 million high school students who drop out of school every single year in the United States. And I put those numbers up there because I think that speaks a lot louder than these percentages. When you think about 1.8 million people who are going to be part of our society. And then Mississippi, 19,000. And then in Pontotoc, because that's where I'm from, there's 91 high school students who drop out per year. Glasser says the thing about the dropout rate that it doesn't show you is how many students are actually doing quality work and real learning. Are they really making connections? Are they striving for higher achievement? Are they making a difference, possibly one day going to make a difference in our society, because they're looking at what can make our economy or what can make their schoolwork better. In that, he would suggest that in a classroom you might have 2 or 3 students that actually do quality work. Approximately, there's 25 students in a classroom. If you've got 3 of those doing work, in Pontotoc City School District, that would mean you would have 76 students doing quality work, which means you have more students dropping out than really learning and really being engaged and getting something out of school. So that's the scary thing about our school system. Who is really learning? So you've heard me say quality work. And that was one of the problems, one of the critiques that I had with the book is the fact that he takes a little while to explain exactly what he means by quality. I was a little confused by that. It's work that should be satisfying to the student. It should satisfy one of those areas of one of those basic needs. One of the things that he has to say about time and quality work, competency and quality would be the rule. Time would never be a factor. So we're not cramming the RAM. We are building bridges. We're making education more about the quality and less about cramming facts. Judging quality in this system, students understand what quality work is, understand the expectations of their teacher, and they know what they need to do better work. Work has the potential to always improve in this system. You can continually make it better. It's kind of like I had English teachers over the years, more than one, who would say, you can't get 100 on any kind of written assignment because it can always be improved. And at the time, that really made me mad. But that drove me and pushed me to work harder on the next assignment because I was bound and determined to prove the teacher wrong. Never actually got 100 on anything written in that class. I'd get 99s, but never 100. Another thing he talks about, and he includes in his research is he talks about extracurricular activities. And one of the things he kind of questions and wonders in the beginning that he asked is, why are students so much more engaged in extracurriculars than they are in academics? And what he found is that students, by polling and just being around students, there's a socialization factor. And yet again, in choice theory, one of those needs was being met. The basic need for love, to feel included, that they were getting. So they would try harder and they would work harder in those extracurricular activities than they did in anything academic. Standardized testing. He has lots of things to say about this, and all of them are negative, to be honest. And I agree with a lot of them. In the standardized testing world, according to Glasser, students are just objects. He says, education is defined as how many fragments of information these student things can retain long enough to be measured on a standardized achievement test. It's just fragmentation. You're not building bridges and communities within even interdisciplinary and even within your own content area. You've got fragments within your content area, fragments within theirs, and they're not even coming together in the content, much less across the realm. So you want to go from shoving stuff in the filing cabinet and just having, honestly, when I imagine a filing cabinet that's not even as organized as that. You just have shuffled papers flying out and things everywhere, kind of like what my life gets like around finals. And then up here you have the collage, and that's really what you would want. What you would want your classroom to be like, or students learning, is more of a collage. And that's not something he mentions. That's just kind of how I put it together in my mind, because you've got all these pieces. You can see that they're different colors, different sizes, but they all come together to make one picture. And for the student, that's one picture that betters their community, betters their learning, and betters just overall their overall educational experience. In this system, education is restricts the learner and the teacher standardized testing. And honestly, I feel like personally that standardized testing, in some ways, and the way it's used right now, is a disrespect to students, to teachers, and to even principals, because it insults the professionalism of the principals and the teachers, and it insults the students because you're not allowing them to make those bridges. You're assuming that they can't do that, I feel like, in that system. But that's just my caveat. Management of the classroom. And I'm going to kind of ignore this side because this is basically the opposite. Some other terms that he mentions quite frequently are boss management and lead management. In the boss management is typically what you see in most classrooms, or the classrooms that I grew up in, at least. We had very strict, very direct lecture when I was in high school, up until I got into some honors classes. There was a lack of compromise. I was told what to do. However, in lead management, workers are asked for input. Your classroom is more of a team, and you are the coach, instead of having, I'm the dictator, this is what you're going to do. revision and quality are unbound. In this system, there's a limit of productivity. You've got to cut off. It's like you achieve this goal. It's kind of like standardized testing where you've got objectives and you just hit that objective and you don't go any further. When I say quality is unbound, you are continually able to do better throughout the year. You are able to continue to revise. Revisions can always be made. You can always learn more about a specific area. And that's something that I would personally like to use in my own classroom. Especially if you teach a paper at the beginning of the second 9 weeks, I think students should be allowed to improve that and build onto their learning. In the lead management classroom, the teacher or the coach shows instead of tells. Here, there's a lot of just direct do this. Here, you're showing. You're showing students what you mean by quality work. You're demonstrating that. You're demonstrating the ways that you want them to think. Workers inspect their own work. We already kind of talked about that just a little bit. You care for the worker. In this system, you have coercive discipline, which says to the learner, I don't care. I want you to do what I'm telling you to do. My job is on the line. This is about me. This is about the company. This is about me and how far I move up in it. Here, you're showing the worker that the work is about them, that you genuinely care about them, that you want what's best for them, and that comes before the company. Even though you want your company to do well, you still have to prove that to your worker, or you're never going to get into that quality world. You're never going to make that breakthrough. Motivation is internal. Another belief that Glasser has is that motivation, that we cannot externally make our students want to learn. That students must want to learn, that school has to be in their quality world or valued by them in order for them to work. One example of this would be, like I mentioned earlier, getting into that quality world, showing students that you care, showing that you care about them, because the thing is, if a student realizes you care, they're probably going to work for you because they value that friendship, because that has fit into their system. And that's a way to kind of coax them into making school something that's valuable to them. Here, the worker or product, the student, that's the focus. Here, the focus is on the teacher. Incorporating quality. So I've already mentioned some of the ways I would want to incorporate that in my classroom, but here's just some more that I've listed out. Peer editing, that would be a way to really see that quality to where students understand what I expect and even what their peers expect of them in the classroom. Options for reading materials, and that goes off of one of the Common Core standards, L93, which says students will write and edit work so that it conforms to the guidelines in a style manual appropriate for the discipline of the writing type. So here, that would be that continued revision. That would be one place that I would put that. Structuring projects up front, that's showing students that you're willing to work harder than they are. You're showing them the work up front. This is what I expect. This is the amount of time and effort. Look what I have done. This is what I expect of you. You're providing students with a rubric. So yet again, they know what's expected of them. I know that's something that I really appreciate. I personally like a very detailed rubric, but I think at times that has the opportunity to really just find your students and finds the quality, and is like the standardized testing where they're cut off. And this is where you achieve, instead of having that more open and allowing students to be creative. So some of my critiques, I really didn't feel like there was, obviously he did the research, I didn't feel like there was enough research listed in the book or enough examples of where I could gather, because I'm reading this book and I'm like, how do I apply this? Like, I've never been in a classroom, I've never had my own classroom, what do I do? Quality school examples, like testimonials of times that it's worked, maybe even some other teachers who have adapted this and see how it really works well. That's something that I would have appreciated instead of just more like this sciencey format. But he is a psychiatrist, so that would make sense why it was like that. Those are just some things that I would have appreciated. Hardest job, and this really comes down to us. If I teach conceptually and challenge them to think and defend their ideas, which is the easy, I know is right, my students have a chance to succeed in learning something worthwhile. But they may not do well on the tests that measure fragments, and I will be labeled as a troublemaker and failure. On the other hand, if I teach in the way I'm told, my students will fail to learn anything that I and most of them believe is worthwhile, but I will be praised as a successful team player, and they will be blamed as incompetent. It really comes down to the question of what's important. What do you think? Do you think your students are important enough